Hello and welcome to Nintendo Pals Podcast. Tonight we are talking PLOK. It's PLOK Talk. And to talk PLOK, you have to have the world's famous ThirdStrongestMole here, the third fastest Odama speedrunner in the world, and all-around PLOK expert. It's Sam, ThirdStrongestMole. Sam, how are you?
Well, I never claimed to be a PLOK expert exactly, but I have played the game all the way through. And it is true. I am out of all three submissions for speedruns for Odama on speedrun.com, I am the third.
It's true. Well, with this cold open, I think let's cue the music here with our intro so we can get talking some PLOK. Greetings, fellow Nintendo pals. It's me, it's Andros, and I am also joined by ThirdStrongestMole, as we talked about in the cold open here. We are going to be talking about, it's PLOKtober. It's PLOKtober, so we got to do some more PLOK talk. This game I have here for the video viewers, this obscure game from the 90s, Super Nintendo platformer, it's a weird one. It's a weird one for sure, but I kind of digress here. I just jumping right on into it. Sam, can you talk about your history with this game? And maybe I should introduce Sam by his actual podcast title, which is one of the hosts of Retro Logic, one of the greatest shows on the internet, talking retro games, and You're somewhat of an expert in obscure and weird games yourself, I would say.
It's something I try to do with content. I think particularly because it can be hard to stand out, but also just because if I think about the kind of content I want to see, it's finding out about games I didn't know about before. Not to say that there's nothing else to say about Super Mario Bros, but I think it gets my attention when somebody's talking about a game that is new to me. That's a lot of really there's a lot of different approaches to retro games, and Retro Logic's about all of them really. But I do find that my sort of angle I come at it from is I've always enjoyed discovering old games that are new to me. And so PLOK is an odd case because it was a rental back in the day, probably more than once. I have some pretty distinct memories of it. One of which actually is that PLOK was in the player's guide for Mario Paint. I remember having that player's guide. I would look at guides a lot because my parents regulated how long I was allowed to play. So I would look at guides and stuff when I wasn't allowed to play games anymore. But yeah, that's something I remember. There's a whole little pixel map. So even if you're not good at art at all, you can just count the squares where every pixel goes and draw a PLOK. They even dedicate 2 pages, I think, to PLOK. They give you a couple frames to do a walking animation for PLOK and a jumping animation for a flea, and show a picture of him with a PLOK style background as well.
And I think they even had a guide to making some of the music for the sound.
I know it had music guides. I don't remember if there was any for PLOK itself.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen something about it recently. I didn't have the guide as a kid, but I feel like I've seen something about it recently while looking into stuff.
It's one of those things. It's kind of weird to think that there was a guide for Mario Paint because it's like This isn't like a game you need to beat, but yeah, just want it is. PLOK was everywhere, man. PLOK was. I just posted something in Discord. I think I shared it both places. There is a comic that ran in a Nintendo magazine in Germany called. It was split over like 4 issues. It was one of those like you just get like a page of a comic at the back of this magazine, and it was Kirby and the Secret of the Slime. It was what the title translates to, and it just throws a bunch of random characters in at the end. There's not really even any reason for them to be there, but one of them is PLOK.
Yeah,
you got PLOK there with Arrow the Acrobat and Mario and
isn't there also
Tiny Toons characters
an old
for some reason?
Isn't there also an old comic where he and Mario like race in ice skating?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same
Yeah,
one?
PLOK was aggressively promoted back in the day.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that I think a lot of people have some pretty fuzzy memories of it, because it was promoted enough that a lot of people did play it, but it just didn't stick. And partly because it never got a sequel. It never really went anywhere. It just kind of was a reasonably successful game, but not one that really took over the culture to any extent. So it kind of got forgotten, but there's enough people who still kind of remember it that it's like in that perfect position to come back. And so that's really the same with me. I rented it back in the day. I remembered playing it. I doubt I got very far. And when I started getting involved in retro logic and people were talking about games and I was kind of just unearthing memories, PLOK was one of them. And so I just kind of played it through, and eventually I beat it, and that was super exciting, especially to get to share that with everyone. And then the PLOK memes started.
Yeah, I talked about the history of the PLOK memes.
And you and I just ran with that.
Yeah.
The PLOK stonks, I think, was the first one.
Plonks, love it.
And yeah, shortly after that, I just started every word that could be replaced with PLOK. I was like, yeah, James K. Polk, that sounds like PLOK, so President PLOK. There we go.
Yes, and well, I kind of want to talk about the game here, like talk about we do each week we review a game for Nintendo Pals. So this is kind of our reviews day game. We're going to be talking about. This is our first time doing it for a more retro title, because we've only been doing this segment for a few weeks. But for these reviews, we break it down based off of story. We talk about gameplay. We talk about graphics, and we talk about music. So which of those do you want to tackle first in talking about PLOK? Maybe
start with the gameplay. That's the core, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about the others.
Well,
so PLOK is a platformer, right? It does stand out, I think, in its use of uneven terrain. And that really shines in how the flea enemies behave.
Yes, and
so
any level
for those
that you
that aren't
have to, there's also the level where you have to slide quite a bit, and you actually have to use that terrain for movement. And anytime you're using like vehicles, that comes into play as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
But so the flea enemies, they hop around, and when in levels where you encounter them, you have to defeat every flea in order to clear the level. You can't just go to the end. And so that's kind of in line. A lot of those later Super Nintendo platformers started moving towards collectathons. It's actually kind of interesting when you think about it, because that started to enter in with 2D platformers, and then it was just the whole focus of like the early 3D platformers. They became collectathons.
I never realized that, but yeah, you're 100% right.
But like, yeah, I mean, you just look at the 3 Donkey Kong Country games.
Well,
like
it's all rare.
They went from just bonus. Yeah, they went from just bonus areas to now there's bonus coins and DK coins. To Donkey Kong Country 3, you had bonus coins, DK coins, banana birds. And like a whole trade sequence and all that. Like, but even like Mario World, you were suddenly getting alternate exits to areas. So exploration was more of a thing. And I think PLOK finds its place in the middle of all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what stands out with the fleas is not just the fact that it's an objective other than get to the end of the stage, but because their basic behavior is to just jump, and generally you're going to want to run under them while they're in the air, like you do with so many enemies that jump at you. Because you can't always jump over them, but you can run under them if you wait for them to jump. And that would be really boring if not for the fact that in every PLOK stage, there are so many hills and little dips in the ground, and just like there are no smooth surfaces in PLOK, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think there ever are. Like there's never like a flat line of ground just about anywhere. And that really changes that dynamic, because sometimes the flea is going to jump at you from higher than you are or from lower, and you have to sort of figure out, or they'll be in the water. As everybody knows that plays a certain level, they will go where you can't go.
That's the
and
worst.
You have to wait for them to jump back out.
It's so terrible. And speaking of like the jumping and such, PLOK's movement is unique as well, in that he has two forms of jump. In that he has just like the basic hop, kind of comparable to like a Mario jump, a little smaller than a Mario jump. And then he has almost a Sonic super jump for getting to higher
it
spots.
jumps higher, but you cannot attack while jumping with that. Unless you're using the amulet, which is a thing you might not even realize you can do.
No, a lot of people don't realize. I've been watching some reviews for PLOK, and a lot of people don't even know that mechanic exists because it's not really explained. In the game, it's never explained.
In game, PLOK just says something about turning shells into PLOK power. It's up to you to mash L and R and figure out how that works.
Yeah.
And even if you did that, you might not realize it's connected to the super jump. It basically turns the super jump into an attack. So you'll actually do contact damage to enemies while super jumping. He literally turns into a buzzsaw
the super
during
jump,
that time, but
the super
it only
jump
lasts
also,
so long based on how many shells you consume.
Right.
So,
the super jump also has a certain level of control with how fast you fall. You can actually hit down on the D-pad to make the super jump shorter. So there's a lot of control with this bigger jump. And then in addition to that, PLOK is, I think, most famously known for his floating arms and legs that are thrown like boomerangs. They go out, they'll damage enemies. If they hit an enemy, they insta come back to PLOK. But if they miss, they come back boomerang style, so they can actually hit enemies on the way back. You throw too many of those limbs, and you sort of lose control of PLOK. He doesn't have his feet, so he can't walk. He hops.
Well, yeah, it becomes more difficult. So if PLOK does not have feet, he is forced to bounce, and so that can be difficult for people to understand too. I think actually, as much as I've seen you get frustrated with the level Go Home Cavern, or Go Home, is it Cavern or Cave? Go Home Cavern, right?
I don't remember.
Anyway, there's a
Go
level
Home something
in the back half, that forces you to do the first half of the level without feet.
Yeah, it's
unique. You have to loop back and get your feet, and then finish the top portion of the level. And I think what the game might have needed was a level like that, but easier earlier in the game, to kind of, because the game has a lot of interesting things that I think are introduced too late, and at a point when particularly since there are no saves, at a point when most people are just trying to gun it for the end. They don't want to learn new things. And I'm, to be fair, I'm critical of many other games when they do this. When you introduce new mechanics too late, or especially when it's like the final boss and it just has nothing to do with the skills you mastered the rest of the game. PLOK has that problem, for sure. Now, I do have to respect that PLOK is clearly just messing with the player by the end of the game. If you've made it to the final boss, you realize they just gave you a power-up, quotes, that just makes everything way harder.
Yeah. they it is interesting because it changes so wildly. 'Cause there's I would say 3 or 4 phases to the game. You have Cotton Islands, which is like the very beginning, and that's sort of the like essentially the tutorial for the game. And then you have the main acrylic zone, which is going to be a lot of those kill the fleas, collect the
Yeah,
flag.
that's when they introduced the flea levels.
Because prior to that, it's just a get from point A to point B. Right, it's a
Yep.
basic platformer, and then they're like, okay, these flea levels, and the flea levels, you mentioned it briefly, are designed with this like backtracking mechanic. So
Yeah, a lot
they,
of them will loop back. Like there's one where there's like a whole right side that you'll go down and up above and loop back to the center, and then you'll go to the left side and do, or you can actually do them in either order, but it sort of figure eights in on itself
mm-hmm. Yeah, so
before the level ends.
they have really good level design. Honestly, they've got like wildly unique levels. It doesn't really feel like you're doing the same thing ever in a single level. The last world is all vehicles. Every level is a different vehicle, and that the last world likes to do the same thing quite a few
Yeah,
times.
and all those vehicles, if they appear prior at all, only appear in warp zone challenges, which are all optional
Yep.
and timed. Whereas in the final stages, you have that power up for the whole stage. Even if you would want to be rid of it, you can't be rid of it.
Ugh, and trust me, I would on some of those vehicles. But yeah, that's the gameplay. I mean, we're kind of deep diving here, and I find it to be a lot of fun. I think it has some quirks. The just a lot of the game is you have to kind of know what's coming in order to handle
Yeah,
it
the game likes to
successfully.
mess with the player,
Yep.
and that can cause frustration,
Yep. Especially in a game that
particularly when there are no saves.
especially when there's no saves and the continue system is a little wonky. So let's move on to gameplay here and talk story. It's pretty light, I would say. Uh, I think the player manual says that Plok's whole personality is he loves flags and hates fleas, which very relatable. Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Well, I mean, I do think Plok is a very interesting character overall. I think that is a, not to get too in the weeds of it, but I think there is a difference between having characters and having story. And like, I almost think the first is more important in video games. I know people might take that to be like good stories are good in games. Bad stories are not. Like that's really all my opinion is, I guess. But I would rather have no story than a bad story, right?
mm-hmm.
So I think bare bones is fine, especially for the time. And I don't necessarily feel a need for Plok lore. I know everybody's into everything needs more lore.
No,
No, I just want more of Plok.
it services the gameplay well, and I'd say it has more of a plot and an interest and story elements than say like Mario Bros. Or even Super Mario World at the
Yeah.
time.
I mean, there's the whole deal that there's the Legacy Island, which is a flashback. You play as Plok's grandpappy, and you find out you fight the first boss again, except there's a third one. There's a third Bobbins brother. And so that just raises the question immediately, what happened to him in the meantime?
Did you
Like,
kill
did he
him?
die?
Did
Did
Grandpappy
Grandpappy kill him? Like, he's nowhere
Yeah.
to be found in the present day.
And I don't know if this is actually true, but when Grandpappy digs up the like head, is that Rocky fella? I
Yeah, there's something in the manual about Rocky Fella. So
yeah.
he's like the spirit of the island. So it seems to be that he can sort of like manifest himself anywhere that is connected to the island. Because like anywhere there's Earth, he can just like pop a head up. Because there's little ones that show up in earlier levels too.
So they're all the
So
same? Is that what they're
or
implying?
they're all part of like a collective hive mind or something. I don't know.
Well, I think that it's fun. I love the flashback sequence with Grandpappy Plok, and then it comes back to the future, and you see Plok is basically trying to clear the island of an infestation of fleas that are coming from this flea pit. I think it's heavily implied that the fleas are actually
From
like
space.
aliens. Yeah. So it's it services what you're doing with the game. So story aside, let's talk graphics. I think that this game is gorgeous. I have heard some people talk about it as being unpleasant because it's a little in your face. It's a little too bright and colorful.
It's
But
bright. I mean, it's loud. Plok is yellow and red, for crying out loud. Like
they
that's a bit of a clash of colors.
yeah, they really go hard with the brightness, and you especially see it when you come out of the flashback world, and you're suddenly back in Plok's regular time because the flashback world's all in like sepia and kind of old timey camera, which I love that whole aesthetic.
Mhm.
It plays this kind of old timey music. It's like an old film, and then flashback, and you're like, "Whoa, my eyes!" as you're brought back to the colored world. And yeah, there's really bright, colorful places. Then you have the dark, creepy caves. It's very vibrant. Everything is very vibrant and colorful. And Plok as a character, all the
Things
enemy
I
design.
find One of the things I find interesting about the graphics, because I've played this on my Super Inti, the analog system, so it's got like different filters and things. I'm not a fan of pixel smoothing normally, but it actually looks really good on Plok. I think
Really,
because
I could see that.
there are so many lines that are supposed to be curved lines, and
Mm-hmm.
so smoothing the pixels actually works there. Whereas I think many other 8-bit, 16-bit games, if you do pixel smoothing, it just looks worse because they're not designed for it, right? But I think Plok actually looks quite good with it, and it's an exception to the general rule.
That is interesting, and now I really want to play it in this way because I've seen a lot of like concept art, and I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff, but like Plok reimagined as kind of a modern video game, kind of in like the Rayman Legends aesthetic, where it's still kind of a
Mhm.
hand drawn look, and I feel like it
Yeah,
would look
it
so
reminds
good.
me a lot of Yoshi's Island, which, to be fair, given the game's history, it was Nintendo was given an opportunity to publish it. I think Nintendo did publish in Europe
Mm-hmm.
only, and Miyamoto wanted to work with them on the game, make it the second best platformer ever. He said it was already the third, and that was before it was done. Um, and so you do kind of wonder, like, was he thinking of Plok when they were making
Did he
Yoshi's
steal
Island?
Plok for Yoshi's Island?
Because it came out a little after,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Apparently, they kind of pulled out from publishing the game in the States because it was too
Hmm.
similar to an upcoming Mario title. So who knows if there was influence or back and forth there. But yeah, it's
And that's something they were saying a lot. Miyamoto made the same criticism of Donkey Kong Country as well. He basically saw any platformer as like, well, we already have Mario, and Mario's better, so we don't need this.
yeah, man. If only he had committed to making it the second best. We could have Plok up there on the cover with Link and Mario and Smash Bros. um, well, so graphics, I think you and I both are a fan. Well, best for last year. Let's talk about music. Uh,
Yeah, so Tim Follin, kind of a legend.
he is.
He did the music for Plok.
Tim Follin is the legend of making amazing video game soundtracks that go super duper hard for games that you've never heard of or would not expect, like
Pictionary on the NES, man.
Pictionary.
If you don't believe me, give it a listen. Give it a listen. Pictionary on the NES
it's a jam.
It goes so hard. It's all the more hilarious because it does. It's like, wait, this is Pictionary.
PLOK is no exception to Tim Follin's magic, and I think probably one of his peak works because it's using the Super Nintendo soundbite. It was so good that Miyamoto had the cartridge checked because he didn't
specifically
believe.
I think the harmonica sound on the title screen was like, how in the world did you make this sound? It sounds so much like a harmonica.
Yep. And that's just the black magic of Tim Follin. And so you've got absolutely banger music for this game. I mean, if anybody listening to this, I plead with anybody listening to this to go check out the soundtrack to PLOK, because I mean, I overhype it for sure, but it is very good. It is very good. It's one of my favorite soundtracks.
Yeah, Tim definitely. I think I even saw something in an interview with him that was a retrospective, and he does criticize himself for this in some of his past work, that he really didn't think too hard about the game, which I think is why you see him work on these games, that they were just like, yeah, do whatever. They just kind of gave him carte blanche to do what he wanted. Like he was really just interested in like, how can I push this hardware to its limit?
Mm-hmm.
How can I, push my creative composition to its limit with this hardware? And he was really good at doing that. But you see, you look at a game like Pictionary, and it's like, this doesn't really fit Pictionary. This is awesome, and it's hilarious that it's the soundtrack to Pictionary for the NES.
Yep.
But it's not what I'm expecting. I think PLOK is eclectic enough that that's not really an issue there. Like, it's just like, yeah, sure, this is what PLOK sounds like.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I was gonna say the same thing. It's like, it's one of those games where it's unexpected, but it fits the game so well, and I think makes this game a standout when it's all factored in together with everything else, because the game is loud. We already talked about the bright colors. We talked about the gameplay being just like a very drastic level design. The whole game is like an assault to the video game senses, and the music just leans into that. He invented EDM music 20 years before it became an actual thing in this game, which is just it's so cool. It's so cool to hear this, because you hear it and you go, okay, yeah, I've heard something like that. But you got to remember that this game came out in '93. There wasn't something like that, at least not super widely known. So it's a very unique soundtrack.
I'm pretty sure Tim Follin is just Marty McFly in Back to the Future. You're not ready for this yet, but your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so Sam, with all of this being said, to kind of wrap up our review here, we do give games a score, and I don't know if do you have a score in mind that you would give PLOK on a 10 scale?
PLOK out of 100.
Out of 100, what would you give it? PLOK out of 100? PLOK. Yep. A PLOK. I'm glad that I have you on instead of Micah, because he would come in here and be like, "Oh, he would be giving this a bad score." I give the game, in my honest critical review of the game, I give it an 8. And it's the 2 points are docked strictly because the save system isn't there. If he had more checkpoints and more saves,
and this is where because I kind of balk at giving numerical scores too much, unless I know what other people's comparison is. Because I do find that stuff like that is interesting, but also it kind of annoys me when somebody will dock 2 points just for one issue. And it's like, maybe that's not an issue to everybody, And like, if you read
This
actual
one I
reviews,
think
you
is
can
an
figure
issue to
that out.
everybody. I think not having saves in Plock is a detriment to the game because you miss out on so much of the game. Like end game, most people are never going to see. But yeah, I totally understand the qualms with the numerical scoring.
Yeah,
The other
but I mean,
things,
I suppose an 8 is fair. It's, but I don't want to be that, give an 8 out of 10 to everything either. So
yeah. Um, I think what I'm trying to convey with the 8 out of 10 here is that this game is great. It is imperfect, but it is great. And it's one I think everybody
So
should check out.
here's the way I think more people should approach reviews. You did say everybody should check it out. It's like, who would you recommend it to? Who is this game for? Is this a
This
must play? Is
Yeah,
this
that's a good suggestion. So who would I recommend play this game? I think if you are a fan of platformers like Rayman Legends, uh, and something like Cuphead, I think that this game,
Cuphead? Interesting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Cuphead's not really a platformer so much as it is a like that's just straight boss battles. But I find Plock to be kind of
Well, there are non-boss battle levels in Cuphead, but yeah, it's a shooter.
it's
Block is a little more action than
yeah.
platform. I mean, it's not Mario. You do attack enemies other than jumping on them. Um,
Yeah, that's why I compare
so
it to
yeah,
something like
there's
Rayman
the question of
Legends.
where you draw that line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a unique 2D platformer that isn't quite. I don't think it quite will appeal to just like a casual platforming audience. But if you're looking for kind of it's also not impossible, right? Like it's totally possible to beat. You have to have a
The game
time
is
commitment.
difficult. The thing is, I think it usually does a pretty good job of training you how to get better at it.
Yeah.
And where you see this a lot is those last few levels can be very hard. But especially the later half of the game, they like to structure things where you'll have to do the same thing
Mm-hmm.
like 3 times in a row, and it'll get slightly harder every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like there will be an extra enemy you have to deal with at the same time. And so the thing is, once you beat that level, the first 2 times you're going to be like, this is easy, piece of cake. Like you're worried about the third one still, but like if you can make it to the third one, like the first one's not going to be hard, right? And so like it does a good job at making sure you're learning. The problem is like it can still feel unforgiving because of the continue system.
Yeah, but we just slap a roguelike title on it and then it's fine, right? That's
Yeah, people love that, right?
the Dark Souls of 2D
Back in the
platformers.
day, it wasn't called a roguelike. It was called we didn't spring for save memory on the cartridge.
So true. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me for this review of Plock, and I hope we inspired somebody out there to check this game out. It is unfortunate that there's not a easy way to get and play this game. It is
It's
only
not an
available.
expensive game.
It is
For what
only
it's worth.
available
It's
for original hardware or on original cartridge. I guess you can
original
play that
hardware
with.
only. Yeah, but
So
you
it's
can pick up a cartridge for like $20 loose.
Yep. So everybody, check it out. Check it out if it's interesting.
Super Nintendos aren't that expensive either. Like it's far beyond the. It isn't Earthbound, and Earthbound's accessible other ways.
Yes, it's true, and hopefully Plock will be soon too. Well, Sam, as we close out here, I would like to give you a chance to plug your stuff. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, so Retro Logic is the podcast. It's all about retro games. We have a Discord as well. Just look that up. A lot of our community members of our Discord hang out in Nintendo Pals as well. A lot of cross pollination, especially for Plocktober. I've been double posting Plock memes in both channels on both servers.
Much
You can also
appreciated.
check out our website. We have a website. There's links to all kinds of good stuff, as well as 2 other associated podcasts. That is Film Logic and Retro Groove. They're about movies and music. Also, an emphasis on the retro, but not specifically always retro. And all kinds of content there, as well as the blog. I do most of the writing for the blog. We do a mix of things. I do reviews from time to time. I do opinion type pieces, but one of my pet projects is something called Games from Across the Multiverse, where I do retrospectives on games that do not exist. The most recent of these was actually a Ploktober special about an alternate timeline where everybody loves Plok and world peace is achieved because of that. So
I highly
I
recommend
might have
everybody
been
read
a
the
little bit
article.
crazy when I wrote that, but it had to be done. It was Ploktober. It came to me in a dream, so
It's so good. And I super recommend the blog. I recommend RetroLogic podcast. Everybody should go check it out. Sam.
So the website
fantastic.
is retrologic.games. That is the domain name, retrologic.games. Not .com, .games.
Perfect.
I also have a YouTube channel, ThirdStrongestMole. That's where I put all my videos up. Lately, it's Mega Man Battle Network. Playing through the entire series. I'm over halfway through it. You can also find archived old live stream Let's Plays, the Mother Trilogy, and a couple oddball things, some other miscellaneous retro games, stuff like Odama, stuff like Avenging Spirit that isn't often highlighted. So yeah, check that out if you like that stuff.
Excellent.
And I stream every Monday, 7:30 Eastern time for Battle Network at the moment. Other stuff is kind of wild card. It might just happen. You got to be ready for it.
We'd love to see it. I highly recommend all of Sam's content, like everything, live streams, blog, podcast. If you want to learn a lot about games and talk to someone or hear someone talk that is very knowledgeable and also just very analytical and good stuff, check it out. Check out all that content. Links to all that will be in the description of the episode. And you can find my work, my stuff, over on Twitch and YouTube at Andros1. You can also follow the show, Nintendo Pals, on all social medias and all listening platforms. We appreciate everybody for checking out our stuff. Sam, thanks again so much for coming on, and we'll close the episode here. All right. Bye-bye.
All right.